Alright, today we're going to talk about scuba tanks because the name of the channel is Boat and Dive, and we're always talking about boats and never talking about diving. Okay, I got a number of scuba tanks here, and we got two primary types of scuba tanks here. We have aluminum tanks. These are tanks that are made out of aluminum. And we have steel tanks, which of course are made out of steel. This aluminum tank is what I call the apple, but there's a couple of markings on here that I wanted to go over real quick. And one is the, I don't know if you can see this, but it says DOT 3AL 3000, which means that it is an aluminum tank and its maximum pressure is 3000. The size of the tank here is 67. That's 67 cubic feet of air can be crammed into this thing, and when you do that, the pressure in the tank is 3000. These are the hydro stamps. Now, hydro testing in the United States of America is required every 5 years. If the tank has not been hydrostatically tested in 5 years, a dive shop is not allowed to fill it with air until it is hydrostatically tested. So you can see this one was tested in 1988, and then several years went by, and I bought it and had it tested in 2012, and then here again in 2017. But Mark, you say, what is hydrostatic testing? Hydrostatic testing is when a dive shop sends the cylinder out to a specialized shop or company, and what that company will do is take the valve off. They will do a visual inspection as well, make sure that the tank doesn't need to get rolled or have or shaken or whatever they call it. I don't know what they call it. And then they will put the valve back on, and they will pump that tank up to 5/3 of its rated capacity. So in the example of the apple back here, the maximum pressure was 3,000 pounds. So the hydrostatic tester will pump 5,000 pounds worth of air in that thing and make sure it just doesn't blow up like a bomb. Hydrostatic testing time frames are not the same from country to country. In the US it's 5 years with a visual inspection every year. In Australia, the hydrostatic testing requirement is every 12 months or every year. And there is no, of course, visual inspection requirement because that's done when the hydrostatic testing is done. The other type of testing that we have on scuba tanks is, in America anyways, is called visual inspection. This is a visual inspection sticker. This is required to be done every year. And it's a pretty simple process. They just take the air out of the cylinder completely, remove this valve, take it completely off, put a camera down here, and start looking around for problems. The sticker here says when it was done. So this was done in March of 2020. So what happens if a scuba cylinder fails a visual inspection? The scuba tank will be sent off to a shop. They put a bunch of material in here, okay, and then they roll the tanks, and what the theory is there is that the material will scrape off the corrosion that's on the inside of the tanks. Here's my vintage tank. This thing's quite old. It is due for hydro and visual, but I never dive with this tank. I just got it because it's kind of a vintage piece, and it looks cool. This is a 72 cubic feet steel tank, It has a J valve on it, which back in the day the thought was that if you ran low on air, you'd pull the valve and it would release another 500 pounds into the system, so you had enough to get to the surface. That went out of favor a long time ago with the advent of small enough pressure gauges, and people just kind of kept track of their own pressure and didn't need the little safety valve anymore. If you notice here, all of these valves are basically the same. This type of valve is called a yoke valve. There's another type of valve that's called a DIN valve that basically the regulator screws right onto. So yoke and DIN. I don't have any DINs. Usually you're a DIN guy or a yoke guy. I'm a yoke guy. I don't have no need for a DIN for the type of diving that I do. This is kind of my primary scuba tank here. This is the one I dive with all the time. You can see that this one was hydroed in February of 2019. This has my initials, or my last name initials on it. This is a steel 100 cubic feet tank. It's a high pressure tank. It can be filled up to 3,500 pounds. This has some really great weight characteristics. When this tank is empty, its weight is about a pound. When this tank is empty, it's buoyant by about 4 pounds. So aluminum versus steel. Steel has a better buoyancy characteristic than aluminum does. Okay, that's why a lot of people dive with steel, because they can wear less weight. If I'm diving with this tank, I dive with 18 pounds of weight. If I dive with this tank, I'm diving with anywhere between 24 and 26 pounds. This steel tank here is very similar to my primary tank. This is my secondary tank that I always take diving. This is 80 cubic feet. Again, it's got my initials. It's steel. It's 80 cubic feet. It's a yoke. And the weight characteristics on this are very similar to this. Same sort of characteristics. When it's full of air, it's negatively buoyant by about 3 pounds. When it's empty or near empty, it's negatively buoyant by about a pound. Wanted to quickly show the vintage regulator that goes along with my vintage scuba tank. This is a Calypso. I rebuilt this one, put on some new hoses, got a new pressure gauge there. The first stage is the same. I rebuilt that, and this is a fun little regulator. I don't scuba dive with this, but I will take it in the pool every once in a while just to check it out and swim around the pool. This scuba tank, it's 72 cubic feet, but it's referred to as a low pressure tank because the maximum pressure on this thing is 2,200 pounds. Okay, so that's considered low pressure, where these tanks over here are high pressure. We got the aluminums at we got the aluminum tanks at 3,000 pounds, this one and this one, and then we got the steel tanks. All three of these are at 3,500 pounds, so those are high pressure. This is low pressure. Sometimes people like to use the low pressure tanks to take on boats because the compressors on the boats, although most of them will do high pressure, now sometimes they can only do low pressure, or it's faster to fill a low pressure tank than it is a high pressure tank. When I was 14, I first learned how to dive. These types of tanks were just going out of style, and the tanks without the J valve on them were coming in style. Now, if you're not sure how much air is in your scuba tank, you can always put a regulator on it and check it with the pressure gauge, or you can get one of these handy dandy little things. I use this thing all the time just to make sure, because the old gray sails, did I go get that tank filled after that last dive? I don't remember if I did or not. So this is nice to check the pressure every once in a while. And I usually do that before I go on a dive. I'll check the pressures of the tanks. Alright, let's see what we got here. See, this one's low. This one's only got 2,000 pounds on it. This is a 80 cubic foot tank, and it's only got 2,000 pounds, so that's not good. So this one needs to get refilled. I must have brought it back from a dive and not refilled it. I think I used this and some pool instruction and forgot to get it refilled. This is my vintage knife. This is from the 70s. And let me see if I can get this thing over here. So here we go. That's a knife. All right. This is an old Sportsways. Yeah. Could definitely kill a shark with that. And you could probably take one less pound of weight off your weight belt. Here's the knife we have for the 21st century. This is for cutting yourself out of kelp or a fishing line. Nice. Hey, I hope you really enjoyed the discussion on the scuba tanks. I know it's a little basic. It's not too much to talk about on scuba tanks, but it is important to make sure that they're looked after and are properly maintained, because they can fail. They have failed, and when they fail, you don't want to be anywhere near them. So have them checked out per the guidelines. 1 year for visual inspection, 5 years for hydrostatic testing. It's not that much money, and could save you a whole lot of headache. All right, well, that's it. From Boat and Dive, I'm Mark McDaniel. Hope you enjoyed what you saw today. If you did, give it a thumbs up, and please subscribe. All right, bye-bye.